It is 15 minutes to the top of the hour. Good morning and welcome back to Weekend Express with me, Michelle Ngele. Now, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission Chairman Wafula Chebukati yesterday said his earlier indication that the total voter turnout in the repeat presidential election was 6.5 million and was not based on reports from all the polling stations, but just a few of them. The IEBC has also said the results being tallied and being broadcast by various media houses should not be taken as the final figures, as IEBC was still verifying and announcing what they have received from other returning officers. Take a look.
The issue of Kisumu West transmitting, yes, there are two constituencies in the mentioned counties where voting has been suspended, where actually in some polling stations elections took place. And one of these is Kisumu West, another one is Muhoroni. So for those polling stations where there was voting, there will be valid transmissions.
Let me put it in as simple English as possible. We were receiving the forms as they were coming in, and we were also tabulating the figure as the forms were coming in. So I can give you the exact figure as at that time. I don't have the data with me now, but there's a team working on it. Now, based on the forms which have been received, we are going to give you the exact figure of the total turnout. That is how many? 37,000? So at the time the figure of 6.5 went out, the forms were not 37,000. They were much, much less than 37,000. Are we together? So if you are patient, we shall give you the exact figure of the turnout in the course of these proceedings.
Following up on that tallying process, with word still expected from the Bomas of Kenya, which is the National Tallying Center here in Nairobi. But in studio with me for more on this conversation, governance expert Kevin Osido, and we also have Esther Passaris, Women Rep in Nairobi County. Many thanks for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, on Weekend Express. So it's been quite a wait for the country, really, as tallying continues across the country. Many thought this would be a lot faster, considering it was just the presidential election, not as compared to the August 8th election. Let me begin with you, Honorable Passaris. There's been a lot of back and forth as to the numbers being given from the National Tallying Center. What are you making of all of this?
First of all, I think it is, you know, with the kind of money we've spent on IEBC and with having Bomas set up the way it's done, I don't think we need to always have Chebukati come to the podium. You need to have a blackboard of sorts that gives you the data as it's coming in, so it's seen, so that he doesn't come on board on the podium and say, oh, it's this many polling stations, it's 6.5. And don't forget, before he came for the 6.5, you were expecting him for almost 4 hours. He was supposed to come in at about 5 o'clock and he didn't. So, you know, when you say, I'll give my next address in the next 2 hours, and then you come 5 hours later, it shows, you know, it makes people get anxious and suspicious. And then, of course, we also have another problem. The media said this time that they would be relaying results. Now, he's saying, do not trust the media. For me, the results have to be the same everywhere, you know, because if the media is there, it has to be the same results as what is in the IEBC portal, as what Chebukati states. Right. And I feel right now, again, Kenyans are not confident that, you know, what is being portrayed is the right picture. And we all know the turnout was really, really low. Right.
Let's focus on the fact that Chebukati also said the turnout that he gave, the 45%, was at 5 p.m. on the day of the voting, which essentially is when polls should be closing, if I'm not wrong. And so if that is a voter turnout at 5 p.m. By close of voting, do we expect any changes, so to speak, after that? And Kevin, you were part of the observers during the August 8th election. What are you seeing being done differently in terms of relying that information this time?
Thank you so much, Michelle. I do not think that IEBC has learned anything, especially from the reasons as to why the Supreme Court nullified the August 8th elections. Because if they probably learned anything, then we shouldn't be seeing some of these mistakes which we are seeing. Because again, you note that the Supreme Court gave them certain orders, which in my view should have informed the next steps insofar as the 60 days is concerned. But I do not think that IEBC as it is right now, despite the fact that we saw lots of meetings taking place between the primary stakeholders being Jubilee and NASA, now NRM, to be able to rectify. And you note that again, part of the demands which NASA, NRM had were, of course, certain irreducible minimums, which in my view, I do not think even up to now that IEBC took note of those issues.
Right.
So those are, in my view, the reasons why we are seeing what is happening to be going on. And public confidence in the IEBC is something that is very, very important in, even as we also talk about the political, the legal, and the constitutional aspects of this election.
Right.
And you note that the CJ, Chief Justice Maraga, said that in the event that what we are talking about is not done the way we expect, then if another petition is brought to me, we will not hesitate to nullify. And to be honest with you, given what is happening both at Bomas and what we've seen happening on the ground, really, Michelle, there are lots of challenges that I think this election has come with, noting the fact that even you mentioned observer missions, and some of the observer missions actually pulled off their staff or reduced the numbers. That, of course, is expected because the magnitude of participation of both citizens and the systems insofar as this is concerned, given that for August 8th, we had 6 different ballots. And so you expected that that was going to affect a number of issues that relate to the election process. Now, just for one ballot, you expect that IEBC should have done enough to, 1, build public confidence in itself as an institution, and 2, confidence of the public even in the individuals, because note that NASA also said there are certain people that we expect to be off this election process if we are going to participate. So in my honest opinion, I think that IEBC, yes, we appreciate the public comments which the chair and all the other commissioners are doing. I think it is okay, but just try to speak the truth as it is, because I think that truth will do certain things. 1, it will build public confidence in the commission. But again, note that IEBC told us you can go to our portal and check. And part of what we've been doing as observer missions is to look at what is in the IEBC portal and what is really being portrayed. So the verification process needs to be in tandem with both what the commission is saying, what we are seeing on their portal, and what actually took place on the ground, which as it is right now, I do not think it is the true reflection.
All right, and all factors, all factors withstanding, the vote tallying as we speak stands at about 7.5 million for President Uhuru Kenyatta, and that is without votes from the larger Nyanza region and areas which boycotted this election, so to speak. And Jubilee has used that to their advantage, saying, look, even with the boycott, we still managed to get this much number of votes, and if voting had continued then in this perceivedness as strongholds, then the numbers would probably be higher. We do not have any facts just yet to go on to say that these numbers are not credible, Honorable Pasari. So does that, in a way, give valid, water or valid weight to Jubilee's tyranny of numbers?
You know, we are bordering between 35 and 40% probably turnout, okay, in their strongholds. Now, if you look at the last election, with the numbers that they got, which was about, 8, I think they're trying to create a perception that, we had less numbers in August. Right now, we would have probably had 9 or 10. You remember there was the 70 plus 1. They're trying to stick with that narrative that we would have got 70 plus 1. So they need to show that even without the others, if we had the others, we would have actually gotten even more. But for me, I think everybody, in all honesty, knows that the turnout in even the Jubilee strongholds was very low. And you saw the Deputy President say it on CNN that when you have a election rerun, right, you normally would have a lower turnout. But having said that, this election was very emotive. With the kind of aggression that Jubilee campaigned from August 8th to now, you would have expected really massive turnouts. But we didn't have that. We couldn't see it. We wouldn't see the crowds. And you say, oh, they'll trickle in. Some will come at 10, some will come at 2, some will come in the evening. But the fact is, everybody knows. The turnout was very poor. The areas where Jubilee said they had strength, which I think will have a big impact on the tyranny of numbers in all the houses. So for me, I think it's so obvious. It's so obvious that this election, again, does not meet the threshold of a free, fair, credible process. Free, fair, credible election. And you cannot say that, oh, if one half of the country wants to boycott, it's fine. Nobody should be willing to go for a competition without an opponent. It was such a joke. And then to also put Raila there.
Let's consider there are other presidential candidates on this ballot.
Okay, no, let me tell you something. Come on. Okay, so, you know, I mean, and I hate to say this, it was a two-horse race. It was between Raila and Uhuru. The others, even right now, it's an embarrassment. I mean, come on. You compare apples to apples, all right? You can't compare apples to potatoes. I mean, it doesn't work that way. So at the end of the day, the others were presidential candidates. I have mad respect for them for actually coming out and standing for an election to present themselves as alternative candidates. But in the first round, they were written off. So putting them there was just to give credibility to an election process to see Jubilees candidate get through.
Right. Let's perhaps interrogate what the low voter turnout that has been largely reported means, because we cannot just assume that those who did not turn up to vote as NASA supporters or Raila Odinga supporters. What underlying reasons, Kevin, having traversed counties across the country during this electioneering period, would you say would account for this low voter turnout?
Michelle, I'll tell you that Kenyans are tired. And people really expect that, well, let me start from this point, that one, President Uhuru Kenyatta and the former Prime Minister are crowd pullers. These are people that they get into a campaign ground and you will feel the power, you will feel the tremors on the grounds, you will feel the presence. With one of them being off, of course, that force, that power, that tremor is just absent. So in my view, that is the first thing, that Raila Odinga has this following of people who just believe in him. Probably they might not believe in what he does, how he does his things, but just the presence. Because he's a gentleman who arrives at a ground, and I have been part of some of his, okay, both candidates, part of their campaigns, because that's part of the processes that we involve ourselves in. And you will feel, really, that there is a candidate who is making a point here. Number two, I have heard people saying that it was raining that morning, and so people just decided to stay off. I disagree, because in August, on August 8th, we saw people actually standing on the rains. People were being rained on, and you could tell that they were there to vote. They were there to wait until their time of going to cast their vote arrives, you know. So weather and all that, I don't think is a reason. And especially for politicians who are talking about weather and rains, I think they need to go back to political science 101. The third thing, Michelle, is note that we're talking about one ballot paper. And there are reasons why people go to vote. And politicians, like my friend here, has relatives, they have relations, they have people that make them go to the polling stations. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is to say that if you have an MCA who goes out there and also wants to be voted, the person will make that independent volition to go and mobilize, to go and campaign, to go and ensure that people actually go out there and cast their ballot for the person. Add this to an MP, add this to a women rep, add this to a senator, and you will imagine. The fourth thing is the number of candidates. There are counties, for example, that had 22 people vying for a senator. So multiply 22 by 100 people. You have 2,200 people lining up, plus the extras who just feel that I am a Kenyan and my responsibility is to go out there and vote so that I can be able to exercise my power, so that I can be able to have a government or a leader that I can also be able to put to account. So part of the reasons why this turnout really came up, for me, the bottom line is in apathy. The second thing is, of course, even credence in campaigns. When you have nothing to offer, you keep howling insults at people and name-calling and all that. People just feel, okay, honestly, there is a date that has been set, and note again that this date was moved from 17th to 26th, and there are people who are saying, we don't think this election is okay. There are people who went to court to try and cancel this thing, and then the Supreme Court came and said, we do not have a quorum.
Yeah, so that withstanding, even with the low voter turnout withstanding, where does that leave the legitimacy or the legality of this election? So let's look at what's making headlines on the dailies this morning. And on the Sunday Standard, the headline there is testing days as exams and politics politics clash, but at the top there, Uhuru at about 90% of August numbers, with tallying nearing completion. His total votes are only 10% shy of what he got in the August 8th elections. So let's take a look at that on page, that's on page 6 of the paper. But before we look at that, on page 4 and 5 of the paper is an interesting headline there, sharp split in Ruto and Raila CNN talk. So we've seen both Deputy President William Ruto and Raila Odinga take to CNN to issue several statements there. First, it was Raila Odinga saying Uhuru should resign because the turnout of the poll was in itself a show of no confidence in his presidency in the country. But Deputy President William Ruto was asked there, I mean, less than a third of Kenyans have turned out to vote. What does this make that election legitimate? And his answer was really simple, saying the legitimacy of this election is provided for and anchored in the Constitution, and it is determined by constitutional provisions that are also determined by the people of Kenya, rightfully so. And at the end of the day, we're giving our results based on the total votes cast and not really the total number of registered voters that were registered during the registration process. Let me come to you, Honorable Pasaris. What then would you say, you know, representing NASA delegitimizes this election?
Okay, let me tell you what. For me, when you look at NASA is, if you look at the areas that people boycotted, don't forget, Raila could tell the people, boycott the election, all right? And government, with its arms of, you know, the strength of government, would have made sure that every citizen got the right to vote. The fact that you had 4 counties that could not exercise any vote, no voting took place. There was total boycott, right? And the election processes there were cancelled. For me, already there, you have a section of the country that is not voting and could not vote. All right? So there in itself, it lacks legitimacy.
Is it could not vote or did not want to vote?
Let me tell you, could not vote, did not want to vote, voting never happened. At the end of the day, the citizens, the voters in those areas did not want to hear about IEBC. All right? And you see that also in the strongholds of Jubilee. There's some people who I think have reached the point where they're saying, you know what, does our vote really count? Because I'll tell you one thing, I really believe that Raila has more support than we're letting out across the country, including Jubilee strongholds. There are people that are reaching the point, there are people who want to vote on integrity. Come on, it is obvious we're not doing things right. People who want to vote for national cohesion. Come on, it's about time that we unite. We don't want to be put as a people that don't want to support other communities. The other thing is, corruption is a big issue. Poverty is biting this country. That is also an issue for some of the citizens of this country. But the thing is, you're not able to see it. And when you look at what happened in Kandara, it is obvious. I mean, if that is just one agent of Jubilee, my goodness, can you imagine if you had other agents like her also? I mean, I saw the other one from Nyeri who was saying that we know that there are 15,000 people who never voted. We're going to fish them out of their house and make sure they vote. I mean, how does he know that there are 15,000 people? How does he have the data to go and fish them out? That means IEBC is JEBC. It is not IEBC.
All right, let's hold it there because you know, you both seem to make the assumption that, especially when you started, Kevin, saying that IEBC has not learned anything this time. Take a look at page 5 of the paper. At the bottom there, why it will take longer to name Uhuru the winner. And it says here that verification of results from polling stations and constituencies is more elaborate this time than it was during the August 8th election. And it says here, I mean, by close of business yesterday, officials had only verified about results from about 114 constituencies out of the 290, making sure that they go through all the numbers, all the signatures that have been given at the end of the day. Isn't this an indication of a commission that is trying to verify and legitimize the numbers that we're seeing on our TV stations?
Michelle, this is very good. Note that part of the reasons why the Supreme Court, actually why there was a Supreme Court case, or rather a case at the Supreme Court, was not just about the numbers. And you note again that one of the defending points of Jubilee then was that elections is not about systems, it's not about all these things, it's not about tallying and what time it begins, it's about the numbers. But NASA was saying that elections can't just be about numbers because we have legal and supportive frameworks which are supposed to ensure that the process is credible, free, fair, accountable, and acceptable to all. who would have then participated by either voting or being candidates. What this indicates is what the process should be. This is what we expect to see. But what is happening on the background is not this. For instance, even as you talk about this paperwork, there are still constituencies or other counties that submitted documents that did not have the expectations, rather didn't meet the threshold which was then expected. For instance, signatures, stamps, forms which appear to be real and genuine. Those are things we are seeing, and not just at Bomas, but actually even on social media. That's one. Number two, there are also tallies or numbers that have been altered, really. And so if you want to talk about this, then the commission, even before the CRO, the county returning officer, gets to Bomas, you must be able to ensure that what you're going to submit to the national returning officer is something that will be acceptable, and that is not what we are seeing. But not again that IEBC, to a given extent, really tried to be able to meet some of these issues. For instance, training for the electoral officials took place in, I would say, a major part of the country. Despite all this, can't we be able to see the outcome of that training, the outcome of what they're expected to do? That is not what we are seeing. So in my view, again, this process would be hit at 2 points. One, in terms of numbers, because we've just talked about turnout, and then number two is the process, because we are still seeing, despite all these processes going on, but this is going on at the National Tallying Center. But why can't we be told what then happened at the ground, where the presiding officers were, where the agents were, where the returning officers of the counties were
I'll come to you with
yeah.
that, Pastor Aris, in just a moment. We have to take a short break right here on Weekend Express. When we come back, the conversation continues. The Constitution gives the IEBC Chairperson Wafula Chebukati just 7 days to announce the winner of the election. Only few days remaining. Will the IEBC Chairperson announce the results of this election without voting taking place in the larger Nyanza region, as well as the polling stations across the country that did not participate in this election? What then will be the way forward, with the opposition indicating they will not respect the legitimacy of President Uhuru Kenyatta, who already has a commanding lead in this election? That conversation coming up in just a moment. This is Weekend Express. Stay with us.